Okay, so welcome to the show tonight. And if you're watching on YouTube, please try and subscribe, and it means you'll get automatic updates because we'd hate to miss you anything. On the show tonight, I posted this morning, we're going to talk about please make sure you're heading in the right direction when you're planning to hit your goal or your target, whatever that might be. And then I added a confusing statement just to get people to think a little bit. And it was like and just be aware that what you think is the target often proves to be something completely different. So that's about as ambiguous as anything could be. And we'll explore that just for a few minutes before, as usual, we open up the show to anybody who's brought your favorite questions about anything. Doesn't have to be about anything that I've said or your views on life or anything particularly exciting that's happened to you. So I'm going to tell you a story. Stories are always the best way to, first of all, hopefully to entertain people and also to embed an underlying message that can apply to all of us, whatever our situation. So they're kind of universal truths, if there is such a thing. And I don't think any of you here, as far as I know, are poker players. Wouldn't surprise me if one or two of you haven't dabbled. And I'm particularly looking at Johnny in this regard because I know that he likes numbers. So it'd be a bit of a surprise if he hadn't experimented. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's actually won a bit of money. But anyway, somebody who has won a bit of money is a person who became my client, I think it was either 5 or 6 years ago. And his name is Chris Moorman. He's from England originally, although he's now based in Vegas. Played for the English bridge team as a junior and as a student, so knows a thing or two about cards. And he wasn't particularly keen to work with me, as far as I can recall, but he was pushed into it by his partner, who was a very good friend of a lady I'd been working with, who is arguably now the best female poker player in the world. And bear in mind, by the way, that I knew then very little about poker, and I know a bit more now, but not a huge amount. So it always amuses me when Chris phones me up and he wants to talk about a hand that went wrong, and he describes it in great detail, and then he asks my opinion. What would I do? But you see, that's the way the mind is. He knows better than I do that I'm nowhere near his league. But just by the fact that he's got somebody who he can bounce some ideas off, stimulates his own creativity and flow. And so I don't obviously need to really answer that question, because by the time he's finished explaining this hand, and it can be as long as 30 minutes, the record was a spring bank holiday where we talked about one hand every day for 4 days. So, and I think, as far as I can remember, he opened with a 3, his whole card was a 3 of spades, or something, a very, very marginal hand indeed. But anyway, that's, we don't need that kind of technical stuff. Generally speaking, I have caution when I work with a client who somebody else has recommended. I find it's usually best if a person has, if you like, shown their cards and decided to approach me, because they've already made an intention. So by the time they've made that decision, they're going to talk to me or to anybody for that matter, they're already quite a good long way along the road to whatever solution or conclusion they're looking for. Although, of course, they don't really know that, apart from when they look back. But it is definitely a gesture of intention. So I spoke to Chris on Skype for about half an hour, and he seemed relatively warm to what I had to say. And then I said, okay, well, when are we going to get together? And we consulted our diaries. This was in January 2014, I'm pretty sure. And because we were both traveling a lot, it was going to be July. Now, I know the attention span of a professional poker player is measured in minutes and definitely not in months. So, and I also knew, this was the intuition, I knew that I really wanted to work with Chris. So I said, well, where are you going to be next week or the week after? And he said, I'm up in Canada playing a big tournament Vancouver. So I said, okay, I'll see you there. And then I pressed the button and that was the end of the call. And that's probably the craziest thing that I've done in my life from a business point of view. I had no agreement. I'd immediately run up a few £1,000s of expenses with the last minute air ticket and a hotel and everything else. And I packed my bag. And I had 3 days with him. And the plan was that we were going to meet for 2 or 3 hours every morning and every afternoon for 3 days. And we did. So I was approaching the first session with Chris. And by the way, I should stress, I have his permission to talk about this. This is a great thing about Chris. One of my books is called Poker Genius, and it goes into what are the ingredients of a poker genius. And it also talks quite a lot about the work that I did with Chris. But I approached him as I would any other client. And I said to him, now, what would you like to get from our sessions together? Now you're here, now you've made the effort. And he thought about it a little while and he said, I'd like to make more money. So I looked at him and I wasn't utterly convinced by that answer. So I said, well, you know, I have done a little bit of research and you don't seem to have had too much difficulty making money over the last few years. You might have had difficulty hanging on to it. That's always a different question with a different answer. But you certainly know how to make money. So I'd like you, if you would, to think of something that you really, really, really want to do. And he thought for probably less than a second and his face changed and I knew that something strong was going to come out. I didn't know what it was, but he said something like this. He said, I want to get this 300-pound gorilla off my back. I said, yeah, okay, I can understand that. Where did this gorilla come from? And he said, I am getting sick and tired of people saying to me that you're the best you're going to go down in history as the best poker player who never won a major tournament. He said, even my friends are saying that to me. And I know they don't mean any ill by that, but that's the question that's on everybody's lips and it's really dragging me down. And I said, well, I can understand that. Because there are many examples that I know of working with sports people where really, really great players haven't won that major. You see, for them, it's a legacy. For me or you, it's just another competition and we'd won a lot of money and we'd be really happy about it. But for them, this is what they want to go down in history and be remembered by. So I said to Chris, okay, I can certainly do my best to help that, obviously. There are no guarantees, particularly in the crazy world of poker, where it doesn't matter how good you are, there's still a huge element of luck you have to overcome. I said, I can help you with that, but one thing I have to say from the beginning is that we're not going to talk about this again. And I sensed I was kind of losing him then a little bit, because then he said, well, what are we going to talk about? I said, we're going to talk about the things that you can control. So there we are. We've established what his goal is. There's no question about that. There's emotion attached to it, which is good. But you see, this goal that he's chosen for himself is causing him a lot of pressure. And if there's one thing that's guaranteed to interfere with performance, with peak performance, it's pressure. And we all know that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of coaches who don't know that, and they still exist. The bullying culture. You know, work hard, you're letting yourself down, you're letting the team down, all this kind of, you've got to be more positive, you've got to have the win-win attitude and stuff like that. Sorry, but I think that does not bring out the best performance. People perform, particularly when they need to find that zone, that magic sweet spot, they perform best when they're relaxed. So I said to Chris, okay, well, let's have a look at the things that we can control in your crazy world of poker. You tell me what you can control. And he thought for quite a few seconds. And he said, well, there's nothing coming to me really. He said, I can tell you all the things I can't control. I can't control the cards I get. Can't control the cards the other players get. Can't control all of the multiple distractions that are going on in the room. And I can't control how I feel. You know, some days I wake up and I'm tired. I might have a cold or something. By the way, poker players get a lot of colds. They tell me this because of the chips, because they're always touching the chips, and the chips are touched by everybody else. So I'm hoping in COVID times that well, I'm sure well, actually they're not doing live tournaments now. The World Series is going on at the moment, and it's all online, and that's the reason why. It's never been online before. And I'm glad to say I had a phone call from Chris a week ago. He came second in one of the big tournaments. Normally he would phone me up and be annoyed because he didn't come first, but no, he was happy. He actually played really well to come second, and he won $400,000. So I'm glad he wasn't moaning about that. Anyway, he couldn't control very much. So I said to him, what can you control? I only need one thing. And after a few more seconds, he said, I can commit to focusing on every hand I play, and giving my 100% attention. And with all these distractions, of course, it's quite easy not to focus on a hand, particularly when they're playing for probably 12 hours a day. They have very short breaks during that time, and a major tournament will go on for usually about 5 days. That's an awful lot of concentration. So I said to Chris, you know, I know when you say something, you're going to do it, or you're going to do your darndest. But if you can hit 70%, you're going to be ahead of everybody else in that room. 3 days later, I let him go to the airport. My final words were, you know, you've been an ideal client, because once he'd got over, you know, maybe some of the negativity from not knowing what to expect, he could see where I was coming from. And he did his work, no question about it. So I said, you know, you've been a great person to work with. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know what's going to happen next. None of us do, but I know that your head's in a better place than it was before we started. So I, you know, went back home, got over the jet lag, and frankly, had forgotten all about it until I had a message that he'd put some money in my account, which was great, because I didn't expect it, quite honestly. And funnily enough, it was more or less exactly what I'd spent, plus a bit on top, which was wonderful. So I asked him about that. He said, well, you know, you came out there. I knew, you know, I was always going to pay your expenses. He said, well, what you don't know is I went in for a major tournament last week, and I got back to San Francisco. I think that's where the tournament was. Or it might have been, no, it was LA. And major tournament, and he won. 5,000 people entered. Only 15% of those would get through to the final stages and make any money at all. He got to the final table and he won. So that's why Chris is still working with me now. And that's why since then I've worked with quite a lot of other top poker players, and they've all done very well. And the point of the story for all of us is be careful about your goal. It's great to have something big to aim for, but keep it in the back of your mind and not the front of your mind, because for you to hit that goal is going to frankly take a lot of luck. And the more of the little processes along the way, the little stuff that you can do every day, that amplifies your chance of being lucky. Well, the second little story is against myself. So it's a very personal story. There's no secret, but I choose, I don't tell everybody this one. Anyway, back in 1991, well, actually a couple of years before that, I just landed. I was ambitious at that age, very ambitious, and I wanted to go as high as I could do in what I was doing. And I landed a job as the medical director for a multinational company called Trafalgar House. They don't exist anymore, but at that time they were huge. They had so many subsidiary companies, and you know, they included you know, the Ritz in London. Their headquarters was just opposite the Ritz. They had several other top hotels in London and around the world, and indeed in Philadelphia. I know that because I had to spend a lot of time in one of those hotels, because it was where the world first heard about Legionnaire's disease, because at that hotel, a bunch of veteran servicemen gathered, and they all got sick and some of them died. And now we know that this is a disease associated with air conditioning plants in hotels particularly, but also in cruise ships and stuff. And now we know about chlorinating water and all the rest of it. But at that time, it was really scary. Anyway, this was a great job, and it was very taxing for me and challenging and very lucrative as well. Unfortunately, my timing was pretty poor, because we entered a recession. I've lost count of the number of recessions I've gone through now, but two at least of them were painful. Anyway, this one was painful for me because, having joined this successful company, they rapidly went into decline, and they were eventually bust, or what was left was taken over by other companies. So that job didn't last very long, and I was in quite a specialized area of work, and because it was a recession in particular, it was going to be very difficult for me to find another job, let alone a dream job. And the only job that I was offered, I mean, there was plenty of jobs I didn't apply for, but people always say, when you're looking for a job, go back to the people you know. And I'd started my international career working for an American oil company in Angola called Gulf Oil, as a general duties medical officer, doing all the emergency stuff in the middle of nowhere. And they didn't tell me this at the interview, but also in the middle of a civil war, and quite a hot spot in the civil war. And I wondered why nobody else had applied. But anyway, I had 2 good years there and enjoyed it, and then left and went to do other stuff. Anyway, Gulf Oil had been taken over by Chevron. Actually, yeah, I think it was around about that. Yes, it was Chevron. And their medical director spoke to me, and he said, "We've got a job." He said, "You probably won't want it, but it is there for you." I said, "Well, what's the job?" He said, "It's going to be based in the London office, and you're going to do physical examinations, annual physical examinations for our international workforce." Well, I'm sure some doctors would like that kind of work, but for me, it was the worst possible kind of job. Repetitive, boring, desk-based, but I took it and thought, well, you know, who knows? I've got to have something. I've got a mortgage to pay, just like everybody else was struggling with at that time. That was when interest rates were at 15%, and they went up rapidly. You started off with a mortgage you could pay, and then most of the people in the UK were not able, and none of us knew where it was going to end. Anyway, this job, I think I was in the job for 3 months when the boss called me in, and he said, "We've got some medical problems down in Nigeria." He said, "All of our expats there are sick. In fact, half of them were in the London School of Tropical Diseases hospital. And actually we can't get people to work there anymore." And this was a big operation for them, and it was being threatened because of the poor healthcare standards. So he said, "The company have decided they're going to put a team together, and you're on the team, and you're all going to go down there for 3 weeks, and you're going to study everything and write a report and make some recommendations," which is what we did. And Nigeria is a very different place then than it is now. Then it really was the Wild West. So, you know, you've probably seen the videos about it, but let's just say it was challenging, but I loved it. And we did this report, put it together, and I suppose I should have guessed. The next thing, my boss came in to call me again, and he said, "I got some bad news for you." And I thought, oh no, here we go again, please, I've only been here for 4 months. And he said, "The management in Nigeria want you to go out and implement the recommendations of the report." And I really wanted to jump up and down and celebrate. But this guy was kind of annoyed and disappointed, because having just appointed me, I was going to be going again, and I couldn't wait to pack my bags. Anyway, as it happened, you know, one thing leads to another, and that led to 17 years working for Chevron and thoroughly enjoying it, and, you know, rising to more senior positions, and ended up as one of the so-called authorities on HIV, TB, and malaria in Africa. And I was part of every task force that was working on that, or at least most of them. So the moral of this story is that Often your goals feel right, but are wrong, and they're not for you. We've talked about being on the path before, and because of my life experiences and the other lives that I've seen, I'm totally convinced by that. So sometimes when things don't look that good, it's worth just persevering to see what happens, because in this world we never know, and there's more change going on now than there ever has been before. So I hope something in those stories resonates with you. I wonder whether you've had similar experiences like that. And I guess, what I'm saying is keep your eyes open. Just remember, as Jung says, and we've said many times before, synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. So, what do we think about that, folks?
I just wanted to say that was absolutely brilliant. That's given me some good enthusiasm and hope. So thanks for that, Steve.
Okay, Johnny, is there any particular hope there, or is it this just a general feeling for the future?
Well, I think at the minute with a certain job or potential job opportunity, and just the way that you described it, how one thing can lead to the other, and one door closes, another opens. I just feel that sometimes you're guided in a path that might be slightly different, but might lead you to where you need to go. So your luck can always be there and change. Well, you've certainly given me some good feeling.
Okay, so just to make sure I heard you right, you've been offered a job, have you?
Well, potentially. I'll hear more tomorrow.
You hear more tomorrow. Okay, well, I actually knew that, but I want to be sure that Johnny didn't mind me mentioning, because as he's on this show. I think he's been on every one as far as I can remember, and he's had his ups and downs and disappointments like we all have. And really, it was when Johnny told me about this job that made me think, well, maybe this is something we can talk about on the show. And it also gives me an opportunity to say, well done, Johnny, for being resilient and sticking in there and never giving up and doing all of your charity work. And I really, really hope that this job works out for you, because I have a feeling you're going to be really good at it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I can see out of the corner of my eye that we have a stranger in our midst today. It's the person who used to be on the show from Poland called Greg. Greg, you've normally got something to say. And welcome, by the way.
Yes, hello. Sorry for being late today. I forgot about you guys, I must admit. But I'm here. Now I'm just trying to find, because it's touching the luck or Get Lucky book that you wrote. And it was a really good book. And the way you write your books is very interesting, because at the end of every chapter you ask the reader to make some notes, or to kind of pinpoint the three most important things that you got out of it. And I'm just trying, when I'm going through my phone, I'm trying to find the things that I noted when reading the Get Lucky book, but I cannot find it really. So I'm not giving any value to this conversation. But all I can say though is that I was applying those notes to myself. I was experimenting on that. And it is working. So we create our own luck. That's for sure. And by improving ourselves, by becoming better versions of ourselves, this is how we bring luck to our lives. So that's my comment. And that definitely happened in my life, and then it's still happening. And the thing that not really focusing on your goals and not really trying to get there and working super hard on it, it does work as well. Because at some point, I think when you align yourself with God, with the universe, whatever you want to call it, things start to happen. And that's the work you have to do, to align with the universe or to align with God. So you just have to think what God is, or what kind of values or emotions, if you like, God gives, or what kind of energy it has, or what kind of vibration it has. And when you can align yourself with that, you can be unstoppable, really.
Yeah, what you say makes sense to me, Greg, and you certainly had your ups and downs as well, and you're really on a roll at the moment, and stay on that wave and see where it takes you. Because a lot of people, the enemy of the best is the good. Because a lot of people, when things start to go well, they start to get scared, like, oh, this can't carry on forever. I should get out now while I can. But I suppose that must be the type of what I've learned from the gamblers, from the poker players, is that when you're on a wave, ride it and see where it takes you, because you know the bad waves are going to be coming sooner or later. And I think you're right about the luck. And I do remember I've written 7 books now, and there's certainly at least 2, well, I think there's at least 3, where I do suggest to people that they write down 3 bullet points at the end of every chapter, as a takeaway. And I kind of question that now. I mean, if I write another book, that's a very big if, I might not do that. And the reason why I say that is because when I give talks to people, if I'm on the stage and I'm able to see what, I guess what I'm very conscious of is that I see people writing stuff down, and I'm sort of slightly disappointed by that, because I know that if somebody's writing things down, they're not giving you 100% focus. That's what students do at university and things. And I know that they're all told this is the thing to do, take notes. But as usual, the world of the mind, the usual rules don't apply. Because when I talk to people, I want them to listen to what I say, and I want them to watch what I say, because there's no accident to the way that I present stories and the way that I present ideas and things, because as we've mentioned before, I'm looking for a connection from my unconscious mind to your unconscious minds. And when we can get that kind of resonance, and it might only be for 1 second in a webinar, or it might be a few seconds in a book. And of course, it's harder to get that in a book. So the physical chemistry seems to help a bit. But when we can get that kind of resonance, it's there forever. It doesn't go away. If anything, it just gets stronger. So taking notes might be the sort of the sensible, studious thing to do, but in terms of developing the mind, in my humble opinion, it's not helpful at all. So I generally ask people to put their notes down, and if they say, well, I'm going to go and forget everything, I say, well, first of all, you will forget a lot, but you won't forget the important stuff. And I said, if you're really that keen, then you can buy the book, because it's all in there, and you can read that book as many times as you like. And another thing that I thought of during Greg's question, when he was talking about this connection to this higher power, God, whatever it might be, I was also watching a little video a couple of days ago from a guy called George Pransky. George Pransky is very big in the field of 3 principles. I won't go into that. We've mentioned it in passing a few times. But basically, 3 principles is a philosophy, and it's really good. It's very powerful. What I say is, having studied 3 principles, quite a lot, not as much as some people, but my takeaway is that I haven't seen anything here that's not in Buddhism, that isn't in Zen Buddhism. So many of these kind of schools of thought are very much related. And I'm not saying that 3 principles is copied from Buddhism. It's just that, when people find some truth or something they think is a compelling truth, there tend to be parallel lines. Anyway, the guy who kind of created this movement was a Scottish welder of all things called Sydney Banks. And he got a lot of traction very quickly with people and did an awful lot of good in mental institutions and things, and particularly for dealing with anxiety and that kind of neurotic disorders. And he became a little bit of a hermit, I think, and lived on one of the Scottish islands. But people would come and hunt him down. And he used to say the same thing to them. And I guess he had a smile on his face when he said it. He said, go away. Go back to where you came from. We've heard that recently, haven't we? Go away, go back to where you came from. And the people would say, well, no, we've spent 2 days coming to see you. We want to speak to you. We want you to give us some truth or whatever. And he said, that's why I said, go away, because you won't find it here. You won't find it in me. There's only one way you'll find this, and that's when you point inside your own head. You will find it there. Now, it might not be physically in your head, it might be from God or anything else, but it didn't come from Sid Banks. That's what he was telling people. And that's quite an important thing to remember, because when we face adversity, we can call upon stuff we know. There's plenty of instances in history, we know this. There are people who can call on something that is much greater than themselves. And they also can do when they're doing good stuff. So there is this energy out there, wherever it might come from. And we don't need to know where it comes from. We don't need to give it a name. We just need to know that it's there. And we need to be aware of what gets in the way of this energy. And what gets in the way of this energy is when we think we can cool it down, where we think we can improve it. And this is ego, of course. So the more you try and tap into something like that using your conscious mind, the harder it's going to be. And I've been talking to one of my new clients about this the last few days, because he's having, he's a really good golfer and his form's a little bit down at the moment. And so he's looking for answers. So he always has a bit of a raised eyebrow when I say, well, look, the harder you look, the less likely you are to find. What I can do, the only thing that I can do, is I can show you how to create some quiet space in your mind, because there's one thing for sure, if the mind is quiet, that allows other stuff to come through it. And as they say, there's nothing more certain to interfere with the straight flight of an arrow than a single thought. So if we have no thoughts, brilliant. But even if we can just get rid of 1 or 2 thoughts out of all the thoughts, it's going to increase our chances exponentially. So thank you for that, Greg. That made me think of a couple of other things I hadn't thought about for a few days. Any comments from anybody? I see, Greg, are you watching the hands?
I'm watching, it's Caroline.
Okay, thanks.
So I was just thinking about getting rid of thoughts. So is it wise to then do what you said, pull in a thought about process, so you're not allowed to think about the more confusing, overwhelming goal? That's when you do that. I'm not explaining myself. What thought can I put in there instead of overwhelming myself?
Well, I did understand what you were getting at, and deliberately pulling in another thought or allowing another thought to be put into you from maybe somewhere else or another person, that's called a distraction technique. And hypnotists know all about distraction techniques, and most hypnotists, I would say, use a distraction technique. And some of them are really, really expert. And it's not just hypnotists. Pickpockets are very good at distraction techniques, as some of us know from personal experience. They know how to deflect your attention, and they can, do almost anything in broad daylight, but you don't see them. Now, I don't particularly value I don't think I ever use a distraction technique, but if I did, well, no, I have used them on occasions. I think it has their limitations. Sometimes people's minds are so full of thought that it's the only way you can get them to slow down a bit. So if it was a golfer, for instance, who, you know, is losing his golf action, particularly on the short shots, or a darts player. I've worked with a few darts players. One of them literally, you know, was a very good player, but when he was in a big tournament in front of a big crowd, he actually couldn't let go of the dart. And obviously, that makes it rather a difficult game. Maybe somebody could throw the dartboard at him and the thing sticks in, but I don't think that's in the rules. But a technique that I've used is I've asked people to, under their breath, to go through the 14 times table. That stops any kind of thought. So they're thinking about the 14 times table. So that will slow things down a bit. And when you tell them to stop, it's such a huge relief. They've exhausted their brain by then, and then you've got something to work with. So yeah, it's a good idea. It's a good idea to force some mindfulness. I think there are better ones. I think the brain loves doing things that it likes doing. And I'm talking here about the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind loves anything that's creative. Almost anything. Almost anything can be a meditation. Doing a crossword puzzle, walking the dogs, writing a letter, doing some painting, designing a website, anything that creates, doing cooking, as plenty of people have found out, baking, anything that you as a person likes doing that's creative is going to be good. There's nothing like that. It doesn't matter how trivial it is. It's not trivial. People do this stuff because they know unconsciously that when they're doing this, it clears their mind and they feel better afterwards. And you can call that meditation, I think. Anything that quietens the brain waves, gets the right kind of brain waves firing is a meditation. And anything that's a meditation allows connection to the unconscious mind. And anything that allows connection to the unconscious mind opens the pathways to intuition, pathways in both directions, so that we get prompted to do things. And that's when the synchronicities start happening, and that's when people start to get lucky. Guess what? That's the magic circle. So thank you, Caroline, for that one.
Hi all. I have a question for you. It comes out of having had an accident last week, broke the collarbone. And a lot of people were well wishers and everything else. And they say, well, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have done this, it'll spoil that in the future. And when I started to think about it, I found that the mind is trying to rerun what occurred. It's also trying to think through what's going to happen in the future when you get back to it. All of which don't seem to be very practical ideas whatsoever. And I've tried, if this makes sense, to listen in on my own thinking, if that makes sense. So the sort of question to you all is, how do you listen in and understand your own thinking in these sort of things?
Well, Ray, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your accident.
Thank you.
And can I see a bit of a sling there? Is your arm in a sling or something?
Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all it's done, and the rest is up to me.
Okay. Now, who are the people who gave
Well, I've got friends and that saying, well, you shouldn't have done that at your age. That was a bit careless, and you won't be able to do so-and-so in the future. And you find it can be quite infectious because it almost gets into your own mind. And you find you're sitting there and he's trying to run through it, rerun what happened. And of course, you don't know exactly what happened. So it's not very helpful whatsoever. And trying to consider what you might do when you get better, how you're going to start this and that again isn't very helpful. The only helpful bit is right now. So as I've coined it. I'm trying to listen in on what I'm thinking and keep my mind in one place. Whether that's the right way, whether I'm saying the right thing, I'm not sure. But there's nothing I can do about the past or the future as yet. And it's trying to work out what on earth is going on in your own mind.
Okay.
Under
Okay,
control.
I got that, Ray.
Is listening in the right term?
It is the right term, because listening is a sensory input, and that works for you. Another person might say, you know, I'm trying to feel what's going on. That's another sensory thing. Or somebody might say, you know, I've got a voice in my head saying this, that, or the other. So yeah, if listening in works for you, then that definitely is good. Now, I bet all of us listening to your story, I think our best wishes from all of us go out to you, and we'll all be thinking, oh, I've done something like that, and Ray's absolutely right. These people come up, and you know, I just want to give you a suggestion. I just want to be helpful, you know, just for the next time. And they go on and on and on.
Yes.
And that's, trust me, that's the last kind of help you need. And you know, they'll get offended, because they'll say, you know, I'm only trying to give you some good advice. No point getting angry with me. Well, you should get angry with those people, because quite frankly, what they're doing is they're implanting strong negative hypnotic suggestions to you. And also, as far as I'm aware, none of them were doctors. So if I can speak as a doctor for once, I can't remember the last time I spoke as a doctor, but I actually worked in trauma, and I've seen a lot of people with broken collarbones. And in some ways, a fracture of a collarbone is a miracle of nature, because generally speaking, you don't need to do anything. If the two ends are hugely displaced, yes, it can heal up better if you pin them together, like use a bit of Meccano or something that's left over. But generally, they don't need that. All they need is rest, and that's why you're in a very simple sling at the moment. And you need some pain relief, because the first few days are pretty painful. But I can pretty much guarantee you, in a matter of a few weeks, that swelling where the bone is healing, called the callus, that's all going to get organized by the body, and it'll disappear. And within a few months, you'll have a smooth bone. And when you have another x-ray, maybe in a year's time, it'll be very hard to see if you've ever had a fracture. And the chances are you're going to get 100% of your normal function back. So if I'm giving you a hypnotic suggestion, then I'm doing it for your own benefit, Ray, but I'm also giving you some medical advice at the same time. So the fact that you're even thinking of that and recognizing the negativity of some of the so-called helpful comments shows that your mind is already starting to sort it, and you're starting to kind of vaccinate yourself against these kind of thoughts and these kind of people.
I find the whole process quite fascinating. It might sound a bit strange, but each day as things go along, and you find it's amazing how quick, physically and mentally, you manage to adapt to doing these things, to push yourself along. But it's the reaction of everybody else, their thinking, my own thinking, is quite an interesting process. I mean, I wouldn't volunteer to break the bone, but it has happened. It's quite an interesting experience.
Yeah, these things happen in life. I mean, I've broken a few bones as well. And it's all doomed from stupid things. And, you know, I know they're stupid. I don't need anybody else to tell me. And if you're going to ride a big motorbike, you better expect you're going to come off sometimes. That's why I don't recommend it to anybody else. But I'll tell you something, if your mind is full of stuff, if you want to empty it, go on a motorbike fast, because you can't think of anything. You can't think of anything else. And that is not a recommendation. Motorcycles are really, really dangerous. So no, don't do it.
No, I learned that a long time ago.
Yeah, but accidents happen, and if we wanted to make sure we never broke a bone in our life, we'd be really safe. But we'd cut out a lot of stuff that's fun.
Oh yes.
Our bodies can take more than we expect, and you will get better. And the same goes for any kind of illness or disease that we all suffer from. To me, the mind and the body are inseparable. If the head's in the right place, the body will follow, and vice versa. And
It seems that the mind is probably the more important of the two. If you can get that under a form of sort of control or organise it in the right way, you're going a long way down the road to sorting whatever. That makes any sense?
It does, yes, I agree, Ray. And the best thing we can do with our mind when we're ill, we all get ill sometimes, is, and I know this is difficult, as far as possible, keep as relaxed and open as we can. And allow the magic of the universe, because there is magic. There's magic in that bone, as I told you. If you could watch that under a microscope, I mean, those bone cells are all aligning themselves. They know which directions to go in. And it's the same with a leg fracture and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen this hundreds of times. Okay, well, sorry, Ray. Fast recovery. Give it another week and you'll be able to start to do a bit more, I'm sure.
I will. Oh,
check
yeah.
in with your doctors.
First week. Thank you, Andy.
Okay. Right, folks. If somebody's got a burning question, they can, but if not, I think we've had a pretty wide spectrum of subjects we brought up this week. We've got to leave at least one little thing to talk about next week, and who knows what it'll be. Well, I don't know, and Ray doesn't know, and none of you do know, none of you know, and nobody knows. That's what makes life exciting. So keep the excitement going, find ways to relax, connect to that deeper, higher power, slow down your conscious mind, and do stuff that you like doing, particularly if it's creative. And also remember to smile, and also smile at other people, and also smile at people you've never met before. They'll give you plenty of space.